You said this next song you're going to play is about Vietnam, and you kind of had George in mind here.
Yeah,
George.
It does. I was fortunate enough not to have to go to Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam era vet, but I didn't go over. I spent 18 months in Taiwan, and as soon as I got out of the Army, I instantly dropped out and tuned in to the whole 9 yards. But over the years, with all the exposure to the aftermath of Vietnam, it began to get to me, and there was like a period where I almost felt guilty that I hadn't gone, because I know so many people that did and that suffered for it. And then I met George Rivers. I know a lot of people in town know George. Big heavyset guy who lost a leg over there. He was in the 101st Airborne, and he lost a leg in Nam. But for all the suffering that man's been through, he's got one of the best attitudes and outlooks on life of anyone I've ever met. And so, whenever I in any way feel down or feel like I'm catching the bum end of something, I think about George, and then I realize how ridiculous,
I was going to mention for all you folks that aren't in Cambria that wonder who we're talking about. George is this really great guy I've known for a long time. He used to come into my business here in Cambria, and he hasn't let that loss of a leg stop him.
No, George.
But George is just one of the best people I've ever met in my life. He's back in New Jersey or New York.
Yeah, but he'll be out here for Christmas, so we're all going to have to get together.
Oh, that'll
and
be
have
a
some
blast.
Fun.
Have George back in town.
George used to do a chicken barbecue down in Harmony. Every weekend, like for a long time, every year, over the summer and stuff, he'd do the barbecue down there. So if any of you that have come over and eaten down in Harmony and seen this big fella out there in his wheelchair doing a huge, humongous barbecue, well, that's George.
He was also a wicked. He also is a wicked pool and snooker player too.
Yeah. He's George.
He's George.
But anyway, he helped me through kind of a difficult time, the end of a relationship, and he kind of gave me a shoulder to cry on at one time, and I thought a lot about him, and I ended up writing this song called "Boys Like George." So I might as well do it. Well, I wrote this song for the boys like George, hoping they'll understand that though some of us didn't have to go, we'll remember Vietnam. And we may have stayed so cool and safe while their sweat and blood just ran. I find myself crying in my sleep for the boys from Vietnam. For the wounded who are crippled, bodies torn, frantic minds. For the nightmares that must haunt them, break their hearts from time to time. Of the soldiers who will never live out a dream or well-laid plan. The boys like George who died alone in a place called Vietnam. Vietnam, Vietnam, how can right turn out so wrong? Brave young men that are gone, boys like George who were so strong. Vietnam, Vietnam, don't we miss them since they've gone? Won't we ever stop the wars like Vietnam? The Marines were there when the Tet was on. The Air Cav had dues to pay. There were MPs dying in Saigon, and the grunts fell every day. And a green troop found no glory in a war that went so wrong. And they died so young and painfully in a place called Vietnam. Vietnam, Vietnam, how can right turn out so wrong? Brave young men that are gone, boys like George who were so strong. Vietnam, Vietnam, don't we miss them since they've gone? Don't we ever stop the wars like Vietnam? Yeah, I wrote this song for the boys like George, the brave Americans. For the ones that came back half alive, the ones that never can. For the soldiers who so far from home had to make their final stand, while they fought to save each other in a place called Vietnam. Vietnam, Vietnam, how can right turn out so wrong? Brave young men that are gone, boys like George who were so strong. Vietnam, Vietnam, don't we miss them since they've gone? Won't we ever stop the wars like Vietnam? Don't we have to save the boys like George from a place like Vietnam?
Well, as an 18-month veteran of that country, I thank you for that song.
You're welcome.